Well, hello everyone. My name is Greg Maluski and I work with Retirement Income Source of Southwest Florida here. And today we're going to talk about, again, the biggest retirement mistakes people make in their financial planning for retirement, for their retirement years. Last time I had a video previously where I talked about how people's biggest mistake that they make is trying to do it themselves, where people go along just doing it the way they think is best, doing it their own way, not working with a financial coach. And so I recommended that everyone who is seriously wanting to provide for their family in their retirement years and make sure they don't run out of money in their retirement years, get somebody else to work with you to make a good, solid plan, to develop a plan for how you're going to make your money, provide for your needs for the rest of your life, and not only for the rest of your life, but for the life of your loved ones. Because I said one of the biggest problems with doing it yourself is that you end up not planning for if one person dies early, especially for married couples. You're not planning for one of you dying early, you're just planning for, okay, the income as it is today with both of us alive. And that's great, but if one of you pass early, now you should make different plans to provide for the family so that there is provision even if one of you passes away early. Now, to do that wisely requires getting good help. So I recommend that you find a good planner, a good retirement income planner, perhaps a certified financial professional, someone that can look at all aspects of your financial planning, estate planning, tax advantage strategies, and so on, so that your family is not blindsided, especially, like I say, in the event of someone passing early. Now, if you make the first mistake of not getting professional help, you likely will make the second biggest mistake, which is that of staying in the market too long. You are thinking about growing your assets and continually building that, even though that was fine when you were young, taking on all that risk with all your assets in the stock market, and then continually working with advisors who would advise you to stay in the growth market way too long. And when you get toward retirement, you really should start thinking about how do we preserve the things that we've worked so hard for? How do we get there? And I'll give you a good analogy of this. You know, when you're young, obviously you go to a pediatrician when you're a child, right? But when you get to be an older adult and you're 60 years old and you have pain in your stomach, do you really go see a pediatrician? Of course not. You would go see someone who specializes in that for adults. As you get even older, eventually you go to a doctor who can specialize in geriatric medicine, okay? So as you age, right, your needs for help change. So then what we're saying is you need to have a paradigm shift, a focus shift in your mindset of how you are working toward retirement, how you're building your assets toward retirement. Okay, so one of the problems that occurs when someone is in this former mindset, the growth mindset, if you will, is they end up getting toward retirement, trying to do things on their own again, and living like kings and queens, overspending way too much, and living as if there's no end to the money supply when they really haven't developed a plan for this, okay? So what we say is work with someone who can specialize in helping you build a good, solid income replacement, so when you stop working, there will be a supply of funds for your family, okay? So now, what I'm going to talk to you about a little bit now is about how to avoid making that number two mistake. When you get into this time period of life where you need to shift from a growth mindset to that of a preservation and an income mindset, okay? Now you can use those assets, those same assets, but you leverage them differently. Now you're leveraging the assets to build an income stream for the rest of your life. Now I'm going to give you an example of what has happened. Now people say, I want to continue to build my assets and grow my assets. Well, what happens though if you retired in the year 2000? If you retire in 2000, 2000, we'll just give you an example of the S&P 500 index, okay? The S&P 500 is a good benchmark for a lot of things in the growth market of the country. In the year 2000, the S&P was at 2,800, okay? Was at 2,800. Now, we know that in 2000 we had the tech burst and a lot of things happened, the tech bubble burst. So we lost 46% of value in our investments that were tied to the S&P 500 between 2000 and 2003, where it fell all the way down to 1,500. In the year 2007, it almost reached back to the original level at 2,400 points, but still not back to where it was in 2000. Then we had the mortgage and banking crisis, where it went all the way down, 54% lost in assets. Everybody remembers that, if you were here in that time period. And in 2009, it reached a low of 1,100, far below where it was in the year 2000. Then it climbed back up slowly until 2014. It finally got back to where we were in 2000. So you had a 14-year period where we call that a horizontal market. You had no gain, but you had a lot of loss in between. And the downfall of doing this in your retirement years is that if you are starting to pull assets out here, they tell you the 4% rule, just take 4% out to live on. Well, if you're selling your shares all along the way here, you're selling at a loss and you're depleting your principal. And you do it again here. You keep taking it out. You take it out here when it's going back up. So again, you're still selling when they're down in value. Here you're selling when they're down in value. And here you're selling when they're down in value. So you have 14 years where you lose a lot of value. And that is really not a good way to provide for your family. So when you shift this to an income mindset, which we'll talk about in our next video, how you do that, when you shift that into an income mindset, you're actually able to draw an income out of your assets without selling your shares, especially in a down market when you don't want to sell your shares. So again, this is just one example, but if you retire in a time period like this and you're still focusing on growth instead of the income, here, I'll give you a little drawing. When you're focusing on the growth, you end up selling at a loss. So what we say here is your total return should shift from just a growth mindset to the I first, the income first and growth second. When you focus more on the income, you use your assets and your savings to provide for yourself a 5 or 6% dividend yield, 5 or 6% growth in your assets by the income that's generating, and then you use that to replace your income. Now, why would you want to do that? One more thing to mention real quick in this video today, I'm just going to say that you need to be aware that there is a common payout structure. If a company ever defaults, a company that is paying dividends always pays the corporate bondholders first, and then they pay the preferred stock second, and they pay the common stockholders last if there's any money left over. So when you structure your savings, your retirement savings in an income preservation model, and you want to use the income from it, you specialize or you set it up with someone who specializes in providing for you corporate bonds in your portfolio, because they always get paid first when a company's paying out their dividends. The second in the pecking order are those that have preferred stocks. So preferred stockholders also get paid. Secondly, they usually get their money. But if there's ever a default with a company, the common stockholders don't get any money because they get paid last. So you need to understand that when we structure an income preservation model, we're using mostly things that fall in this bracket right here. All right, and then for my next video, we'll talk more about how we break that down and put that together for you. So stay tuned, hit that like button and subscribe for more information. See you later.